and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Just Parlays show here at the Max Wagers Network. It is currently Monday, September 12th, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Chris King, and together we're going to recap all the football and the craziness that happened over the weekend before getting into the pretty uneventful betting card for Monday. I know you have one football game, but I think all of you know what I mean. Baseball's pretty underwhelming today. Chris, how's it going with you? How's your weekend?
That's an understatement about underwhelming. The card today sucks. I mean, everybody's real excited, I'm sure, about the Marlins and Rangers playing a doubleheader.
Hey, listen, that was my play. That was my play of the day. Okay, so don't go roasting my game one action.
Oh, you took game one. You took Glenn Otto and Rogers.
Yeah, I took Otto. It was plus 115. I figured, Miami's not going to hit anyway, so I might as well get plus money out of it.
I agree. It wasn't a bad weekend. Premium side had a 4-teamer Saturday and Sunday, and a couple of 2-teamers on both days. So can't complain from that perspective. From the perspective of what we saw on the field, there's just no accurate one adjective that can sum up what we saw with some of those games.
Well, I think it'd be best if we broke it down. Do you want to go through college first or the NFL first?
I'll let you choose.
Okay, so we'll go college because, of course, that was Saturday, and we'll kind of transition over chronologically speaking. So, starting with college, if you laid points with a ranked team, you lost, mostly in the top 10. It did not go well for the most part. I mean, you had Utah that won by like 70, and you had a couple of exceptions there, but the top 10 barely covered. Did any teams cover? I don't think any of the top 10 covered.
No, I don't think so. Alabama barely won. Clemson was favored by 40-something and didn't even score 40-something.
I love the Twitter reaction to praising DJ's passer rating and like QBR for his performance. Like, great job. It's like, you played Furman. Like,
and that's what we've reached. The sad part is they talk about how great Clemson's defense is, and they made Furman's quarterback look good.
Yeah. Well, I also wonder how much they cared. We saw Georgia settle for a bunch of red zone field goals against Samford. Does that matter? Not really. I feel like it would be best to start off with the upsets and what should have been an upset. I'm actually going to start there because that was the main game. I actually had action on it. Did not go my way. Bama. And they should have lost to Texas in a variety of ways. First of all, if Ewers stays healthy, they might get blown out because Ewers looked really good early on. And I've never been a Hudson Card guy, but, he did his best, I guess, and he got injured in the second half. But Bama was definitely benefited from the no safety, which was one of the worst no calls or calls, or whatever you want to call it, I've ever seen, with the roughing the passer and everything like that. That should have been a safety. You had the face mask inside the 5-yard line, which would have set up an automatic 1st and goal at basically the 2, which would have resulted in a touchdown most likely for Texas. Instead, they had to kick a field goal. You had the hold on the Bryce Young scramble at the end, which was blatant. Yes, it should have been a sack anyway, but that was clearly a holding penalty. Did you have any takeaways from Bama? Because my main takeaways were Texas, very, very solid athletes, which we knew, but mostly Bama's receiving core, it's pretty difficult to replace 2 of the better receivers that you've had and rely on a bunch of unproven commodities. And it seemed like without Mechie and without Williams, they really don't have any weapons at all.
Yeah, Ja'Cory Brooks didn't do a whole lot. I know they were hoping to get more out of Burton, but 2 catches for 10 yards isn't really going to move the needle. And I think the big thing was that Alabama, they got bullied at the offensive line. I mean, you talk about how Young got away on that play, and there should have been a holding call that wasn't. But, he basically was going to get annihilated before he ducked out of the way there. The one thing
really the safety call for me that was just the next level moment of the game. But yeah, I'll let you continue. But the safety one's the kind of the play that sticks out to me.
Yeah, but I mean, on the flip side, you can still look and say, Alabama might not need to score a ton of points to beat teams. You look how well they played defensively, especially against the run. They made Bijan Robinson look pedestrian. 21 carries for 57 yards.
He had a touchdown.
But 18 of those yards came on 1 carry. So you're talking about on his other 20 carries, he averaged less than 2 yards a run. Yeah. I mean, as a team, Texas averaged 2.4 yards a carry. That defense, Will Anderson and Helms and the rest of those guys, To'o, or however you pronounce it.
I thought Gary Patterson did a great job of helping construct the game plan against Bama.
True.
So props to him. I thought he did a very good job.
Yeah, he did. He did a good job. I'll give him that. It's just that, this is what we usually see happen somehow, some way. Alabama finds a way to win these games more
And
often than they don't.
Texas usually
And
finds
Texas
a way to
finds
lose these games.
exactly.
Now,
That's what I was going to say.
for the record, the officials are brutal, and Texas probably should have won. Doesn't help they have a backup quarterback for 3/4 of the game. Having said that, Sarkisian's play calling in the red zone was absolutely atrocious. And even though they missed the field goal at the end of the first half, which was a brutal miss, and even though they made the kick at the end to give them the temporary lead, they really couldn't get any first downs to drain any more clock. You had to settle for a 40-something yard field goal because you got sacked on 3rd and 2. Really? There were a lot of really bad play calls in the red zone where even on the touchdown with Robinson, it took 6 plays. They had a pass interference in the end zone. There were a lot of really bad play calls, and that's plagued Sarkisian his entire coaching career, whether it was at, here, whether it was in the NFL with the Falcons as an offensive coordinator, whether you want to go back to USC, his red zone play calling has always been terrible. And
True.
Texas had a really hard time punching it in, and they had to settle for a couple field goals. And one of them they missed, the other one they made. But the fact that they couldn't drain the clock late and they still left roughly 2 minutes for Bama was embarrassing. And I think we all knew when Bama got the ball back, they were going to win the game.
Yeah,
Do you have any doubt in your mind? I thought Bama, as soon as they got the ball back, it was a wrap.
Yeah, what you knew once Alabama got the ball back with under 2 minutes ago, and the team on the other sideline wasn't Georgia.
They're playing prevent, and they're just giving up free 15-yard passes over the middle the entire drive, and it's all right, I know where this is going.
Yeah, all I thought when I saw that is I thought of Jerry Glanville with his comment about how, this is the NFL, and that stands for not for long if you keep making plays like that in this league. And that's basically what I thought. You can't make those kind of play calls defensively when you're trying to hold a 2-point lead. And all you got to do is kick a field goal with a guy who's pretty good at putting the ball through the uprights in Reichert.
A hell of a kicker. But yeah, I really didn't like the last couple of minutes for Texas. Not surprised. Sarkisian, I'm not a fan of as a coach. I was very impressed with Texas, though, and I thought they did a very good job. The issue was they had a backup quarterback, and they got extremely conservative in the red zone. And that's really the story of the game for me. Besides that, you do have the embarrassing losses. Bama got away, but you had Notre Dame losing to Marshall as roughly a 3-touchdown favorite, and you had A&M losing at home to Appalachian. First of all, they're pretty equally bad. Which loss do you think is worse and why? Because I'm leaning A&M.
Yeah, I think you have to lean A&M. They've talked all offseason about how they had this great recruiting class, how they were going to challenge in the SEC West, and you hang 14 points against Marshall. Now, don't get me wrong. Marshall's a great mid-major team. You could have made a ton of money blindly betting the Sun Belt this weekend.
With Ali out, by the way, because Ali still hasn't played a game for Marshall.
That's true. Notre Dame, it doesn't surprise me. They're not that great. I mean, now
rebuilding. What are they supposed to do?
Now Buckner's out 4 months, so it's gonna be Drew Pine under center.
That's probably an upgrade because I don't think that Buckner, whatever you want to call him, I don't think he's any good.
Well, the problem is they don't have a ton of weapons. Outside of Mayer at tight end, who are you going to throw to?
They don't have anything.
Yeah, and that's their problem. They can't sustain drives and beat teams. And you saw Buckner basically, cough the game up down the stretch, throwing that pick six, and then Pine came in and threw an interception too, just to make sure that they weren't going to win. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a long season in South Bend, and you have to feel for Freeman because he walked into this.
That was kind of going to be the segue that I was going to ask you, because it's always difficult to fully evaluate coaches who just got the job and they still have a transition period between the old coach and the new coach, and most of the players who wanted to play for the old coach probably transferred at this point. Freeman's 0-3 as a head coach. I personally don't think he's a very good coach. Now, I will concede you are right about the lack of talent. That doesn't change the choke job against Oklahoma State in the bowl game last year and a couple other examples, but I think Freeman is a guy who the locker room really likes, but I don't think he's actually good with X's and O's. And if I was comparing him to an NFL coach right now, it'd probably be Robert Saleh. I think you can make a comparison there. People want to like him.
I thought you were going to say Mike McCarthy.
No, I was going to say Saleh because people like him because he provides an energy, and the players clearly like him. But when you actually watch them on Saturdays or Sundays, you feel like they get out-coached in every game they're in. That's kind of the feeling I get for Freeman. I don't think he's a very good game day coach, but the players like him, and he's supposed to get a top 3 recruiting class. So we'll see what happens once they fully, retool and they refill the cupboard. But I don't think Freeman's actually a good X's and O's coach, and that's the main takeaway I've gotten for the first 3 games of his coaching career. You?
Yeah, it's gonna be a rough season for them. They get Cal at home next week, so maybe
They
they'll get a
might
win.
not make a bowl game. Like there's a chance that they lose 7 games. It's unlikely. I think they'll probably win 6 or 7. But if Notre Dame goes like 5-7, and you've seen this team play for 2 games, would you really be shocked? Probably not. They
No,
can't move the
probably
ball.
not. No, and I mean, you look at their schedule. Like I said, they get Cal at home. They go to North Carolina, and we know how the Tar Heels can put up a ton of points while giving up.
They're the opposite of Notre Dame. They don't guard anybody, but they can actually score. So we'll see. But all I know is I'm looking at Freeman, and yes, they don't have much talent, but you're still Notre Dame. So even a lack of talent for your standards is probably better than a Sun Belt team, for example, just on the top of my head. But I just think Freeman's not a very good coach at this stage in his career.
Yeah,
but that's my takeaway.
But I mean, you look, and Buckner was their leading rusher in the first 2 games, and he ran for 62 yards, averaged 2.6 yards a carry. They have no running backs.
Well, how much of it is actual roster talent, and how much of it is game planning? Because yes, the talent is down compared to most Notre Dame teams. It's still Notre Dame. You're still getting a bunch of 4- and 5-star recruits at every position no matter what. It looked like Notre Dame got out-schemed for the entire 60 minutes. That was my point. Yes, the talent isn't good, but it really looked like Marshall's coaching staff was coaching circles around him the entire game.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, let's be honest.
That's my point. I think Freeman, let's just say, is a work in progress at coach, and so far I'm not impressed. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you haven't been impressed by Mike Norvell for 4 years now.
Yeah. I'm not saying Freeman can't turn it around. I'm just saying I can usually tell which coaches are going to work out and which ones aren't. I like to believe that my strict view usually is correct because most coaches don't reinvent themselves. That just doesn't happen. And this is what I see Freeman being. I think he's a coach that's going to need good talent in order to win. And I think he's never going to be able to actually get to the playoff because when push comes to shove, he'll get out-coached against a couple of decent teams, and they'll get upset. That's my takeaway. But to kind of transition over to A&M, speaking of coaches who have not really adapted, you have Jimbo Fisher, who ended up losing to Appalachian. They used King as their quarterback, even though I could tell you he was bad in the first game against Colorado last year. He got injured, but he was bad before that anyway. Do you have anything you want to say about A&M? Because it wasn't even like they lost. They got blown out. They had, 180 total yards of offense against a Sun Belt team at home?
Yeah, I mean, they turned the ball over, twice. They let App State completely dominate the clock. I mean, Chase Bryce wasn't great. He only hit 50% of his passes.
It was a disaster for A&M.
They ran the ball 52 times. They let App State run the ball 52 times. I mean, granted, they didn't pick up a ton of yards because they only ran for 181. But you're controlling the clock. You're bleeding time away. And like you said, Texas A&M wasn't good. They scored, one offensive touchdown. Their other one was a kick return. They just looked lifeless out there. 9 first downs. You had the ball for 18 minutes.
And once again, I don't think King is a good quarterback. And yes, they did lose Spiller. That's not the point. The point is you're still A&M. You still get 5-star recruits. You have a top 3 recruiting class every year. And yet you couldn't do anything for 60 minutes. You did nothing. And Appalachian State, yes, they're a good team. They're still my pick to win the actual Sun Belt. They gave up 63 points to North Carolina, and you couldn't even get more than 200 yards of offense. 63 points in week 1, and you can't move the ball. That you do less than they have 8. How many first downs they have in that game? They had 10?
9.
8? They had 9 first downs against a team that gave up 63 points last week.
Yeah, 2 for 8 on third down. They finished with 186 yards of offense.
If Jimbo didn't have a contract for, $900 million, that's a fireable offense. That's embarrassing. You cannot lose that game. And even if you do lose that game, you cannot lose it in the manner that you did. If you outgain them by 100-something yards and you lose the turnover battle by 3, then okay, stranger things have happened. but you can't get dominated in the trenches and just do nothing offensively for 60 minutes against Appalachian State. That can't happen.
Yeah, they basically ran it down their throats and made them, pretty much choke on it because they did nothing.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. So if I was voting on what the most embarrassing performance was from college football, it's going to be Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M, because that really it cannot be overstated how awful they were in that game. Besides that, though, did you have any other takeaways? I know Wisconsin lost. I'm not surprised. Same thing with Iowa. You keep running it back with terrible quarterbacks. You play stupid games, you're going to win stupid prizes. It's not exactly surprising that Iowa could not move the ball. It was kind of ironic that in a rock fight, the game-winning drive was a 99-yard touchdown drive. I thought that was pretty funny.
That took
Iowa
3.5 hours. That took 3.5 hours.
took 3.5 hours. It was like watching Mark Sanchez with the Jets with like Rex Ryan as a coach, and they'd go on those long playoff drives, and they'd randomly win by taking off like 15 minutes off the clock. Good win for Iowa State. Matt Campbell, I thought, tried to give it away because he just let Iowa get into field goal range in the final couple minutes. But good win there. Wisconsin lost because Mertz can't throw, and Iowa lost because Petrus can't throw. You have any other takeaways? Because it seemed to me like both teams insist on playing offense like it's 1950, like I said. And if you voluntarily are going to limit yourself to less than 20 points, you can lose to anybody. That's my takeaway.
And the fun thing about that Iowa game was their touchdown came where they only had to go 16 yards.
Yeah, they didn't do anything.
Because they blocked a punt. But yeah, I mean, the fun part, I told you that, the fun bet on that game was both teams not to score 20 points. And they didn't combine to score 20 points. So, I mean, they made for an easy walk to the window on that front. I mean, you had 6 turnovers. Iowa had 150 yards. They can't run. They can't complete a pass to save their lives. And they couldn't come up with a stop when they needed to. I mean, that touchdown drive that Iowa State had, like we said, 99 yards. They ran 21 plays.
I was going to say, there were a bunch of like 3rd and 5 conversions throughout that entire drive.
Yeah, I mean, you can't let a team drive that far down. I mean, they chewed up almost 12 minutes.
I'm not going to blame the defense. Yes, it was a bad drive for their standards. Score some damn points. Like, the defense gave up 10 points. I get it. It was a bad drive for the defense, but Iowa's defense has had to stand on its head for the entire season. I want to go through Petrus's numbers, and I want to know why he wasn't benched at any point in this game. So the first week against South Dakota State, 11 for 25, 109 yards, QBR of 1, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. Against Iowa State, 12 for 26, so he had 1 more completion on 1 more pass attempt. He had 17 less yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. He averaged 3.5 yards per, 3.5 yards per completion, I believe. Yeah. And a QBR 12.1. You're really telling me that you can't bench the guy midway through the game? Like, you watched Petrus last year. You know that he's atrocious. Your team has 7 points courtesy of a short field touchdown. You really can't bring in a backup at any point? Like, Fentress, what are you doing?
Their backup is worse.
I don't think you can be worse. At least Padilla can move. They have some mobility, but what the hell is Fentress doing? Like, what are you waiting for?
He's waiting for Flag Day.
I just don't get it. You see the same Big Ten coaches do the same nonsense every single week or year with Paul Christ and with Fentress, and if you want to even if you want to group Bielma in there, you can. I won't, because they actually went for DeVito. They actually used the transfer portal. Congratulations, and DeVito's actually been okay for them. But I don't know how you can go into every season, year in, year out, with a crappy quarterback that you've had for 3 or 4 years and just run it back. I don't know how you do it. It doesn't make any sense. But 2 home games against Iowa State, who you've owned for the last decade and change, and South Dakota State, you've scored a total of 14 points. Congratulations. Have fun with Petrus for the rest of the season. What do you want?
Yeah, James said Iowa scored 14 points in their first 2 games, and they're giving up 21 to Nevada this week.
It could be. They might lose if they give up 17 points in any given game.
No, he
But
means they're laying 21.
oh, yeah, have fun with that. I mean, Nevada's bad, but I mean, damn, man. Like, you got to get it together. But Wisconsin's a similar story. And Mertz's line was not bad at the end, but you watch the entire game. He can't throw the ball more than 10 yards. It's just constant checkdowns, mostly to the tight end. And because of that, it's almost impossible to sustain long scoring drives. They had a blocked kick. Tight end fumbled in plus territory in the fourth quarter. I'm not going to blame the tight end because he did have 2 touchdowns, I believe, so he had a pretty good game overall. But Mertz, we know isn't good. We've seen it for 2 years. And yet they just keep recycling the same garbage, and they're wondering, why can't we beat Ohio State every year? It's because you can't score more than 14 points against crappy opposition. That's why you can't beat Ohio State.
And speaking of games that went down to the wire, not only did the University of Buffalo lose on a Hail Mary to Holy Cross,
There were a lot of FCS upsets this past week.
we watched the end of the Scott Frost era as Nebraska fired him over the weekend. Must be nice to be terrible at your job and still get a $15 million payout at the end of it. But
652 yards of offense.
Well, it's like I told you, they made Kyle Van Treese look like Warren Moon in his prime.
652 yards of offense to Georgia Southern. They don't even run the option anymore. Like this is like their first year of using an actual passing game. 650. What the hell are you doing?
Van Treese threw for 409. I mean, and he made plays when it mattered. They had that 4th down on that last drive, and he hit a big pass. Then, he goes back to throw, and all of a sudden the middle of the field opens up, and he walks into the end zone. Let me tell you, he's not the fastest guy around. But, I mean, he could have pimp walked his way into the end zone as far as that went because there was nobody there.
Like the Red Sea. There's nobody there. I mean, he just ran right in. But I still can't get over the fact that Georgia Southern reinvented its entire offense. Anybody that stayed over on that offensive unit was used to running triple option for the last X amount of years. And yet they put together a passing game in the entire offseason, and they torched Nebraska for 400-plus passing yards. And yes, I know that Nebraska's offense was good. It's another close loss for Scott Frost, and that's why he's gone. And he should have been gone last year. The fact that they kept him for 2 weeks this season tells you the current state of the program. They don't care about money because they paid him like $15 million to get lost. But I don't really know what else to say. It was a complete failure. It's one of the biggest coaching tenure failures we've seen in a while. And the next full-time head coach, you really can't be any worse.
I love the list of people that they say could be considered for the Nebraska job. Why don't you just put Tom Osborne back on the list?
Even the game they won, they were tied against North Dakota in the third quarter.
But, I mean, you look at the names that they're throwing out there. Do you think Jamie Chadwell is going to leave Coastal Carolina to go to Lincoln?
No.
I mean, they're just throwing out – basically they'll throw out any hot name because they're like, oh, it's a Power 5 school. It's in the Big 12. Well, yeah, but if your team –
on Twitter. There were links to Aranda, and there were links to Fleck. There were links to a bunch of – I'm like, why would anybody want to go to Nebraska? The only candidate I think that's actually reasonable, Gary Patterson.
Yeah, I don't know if Patterson wants to walk into that dumpster fire either.
Just saying, that's one of those guys that makes sense that I think could actually take the job. But you're throwing in Matt Campbell, and you're throwing in a bunch of guys who are clearly in better situations right now. Like, why would Matt Campbell – yes, I think that he's a bit overrated in general, but why would he leave – a week after beating his arch rival for the first time? He's not going to leave. He just beat Iowa. Like, why would he leave? Like, nobody's going to leave. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. But, yeah, Nebraska's a mess. They're poorly run. And Frost was the hometown kid coming back. Congratulations. He can't coach.
Yeah, look at the coaches that they've gone through since Osborne retired. And I know you were, knee-high to a grasshopper when Osborne finished his tenure in Nebraska back in 1997.
Is Pelini their best coach since?
I mean, Frank Solich was good. Then they fired him because they fired him when he was 9-3 in 2003. And then they had Pelini was the interim for that year. Then they brought in Bill Callahan for 4 years. Then it was Pelini and his temper, and that's what ran him out of town. Then you had Mike Riley, who couldn't coach at Oregon State, couldn't coach at San Diego in the NFL, and he couldn't coach in Lincoln. And then it's been Frost. None of those guys have anything on the two guys that preceded them, because for the longest period of time, you had Bob Devaney from 62 to 72, and then it was Osborne from 73 all the way to 97. And those guys won. Since then, they don't win jack shit. And that's been their issue. Sure, they get to bowl games, but who cares if you get to the Capital One Bowl or the Holiday Bowl or the Music City Bowl?
Frost didn't even make bowl games, so
nope, they haven't been to a bowl game since 2016.
Yeah, the fan base might actually be partying if they make it to a bowl game, but that's kind of my point. I feel like a lot of these schools, they kind of remind me of USC in the post-Pete Carroll era. USC wasn't this bad, but the idea is they keep trying to coast on the reputation, saying we're school X. People will flock to coach our team. Why the hell would they flock to coach your team? You've had a dysfunctional program for basically a decade and change, and USC has a location. You have California. It's a very good high school state. You have options. Nebraska? Why would anybody want to go to the middle of the Midwest where you're not going to get many 4-star recruits? Why? Because you were good in the 1990s and 80s? Like, what kind of recruiting pitch do you have for a coach?
You can pitch Counting Crows and say Omaha, somewhere in middle America.
I guess that might actually be the only approach they have, but that's kind of the point. Nebraska did what they had to do, but the program's a mess, and I'm not going to let it slide just how big of a mess they actually are. Now, to go through anything else, do you have anything else you want to add for college football, or should we transition over? Because we're like half an hour in. We didn't even talk about the NFL card, and there were a lot of crazy games there.
Yeah, I think we should transition over. I think we hit the high notes in college. Other than the septuple overtime game where Eastern Kentucky held off Bowling Green 59-57.
Yeah, shout out to Eastern Kentucky there. To go through some NFL action, though, I feel like we can go through just the crazy endings. Which ending do you think was the craziest? Because I'd probably vote for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think it has to be Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. I thought the Bengals were going to win that one rather comfortably. Instead, they went back to being the Bungles, turned it over 5 times. They lost their long snapper. They missed an extra point that could have won it. They missed a 29-yard field goal that could have won it. And they shot themselves in the foot at the end of the game because after Burrow got sacked, they punted the ball with 14 seconds left on the play clock. If you run the play clock down to 1 like you should, if you had any friggin' common sense, Zach Taylor, Pittsburgh doesn't get a chance to drive down the field and kick a field goal because they wouldn't have had enough time. It's called clock management. Look into it.
And they actually made it to the Super Bowl last year. A reminder that you can be a really, really talented football team, but if your coach is bad, then, it might get a little bit disguised. But no, their coach is awful. I'm not a Taylor guy at all.
Yeah, I mean, they blew a thing where Chase scored in the fourth quarter where they hurried up and quick snapped it. So they ended up getting the ball spotted at the 1 instead of letting it get reviewed. And then they didn't even score on that drive because Mixon got stuffed on the quick snap and they ended up throwing a couple incompletions. They did everything they could to try to freaking lose the game. And inevitably they did. But poor clock management, poor coaching all around, horrible showing, for all the talk about how they invested in the offensive line. Burrow still got sacked, 7 times?
Yeah, he got sacked 7 times. I actually had a very nice win in that game. I had the first touchdown in the game. Steelers defense plus 4,500, which was a nice win for me. So that was definitely a good way to start my football Sunday. But to go through all the other games,
you got plus 4,500 and you're still in the hole this weekend.
Yeah, it was not a good Saturday. College football was rough, but it was a good Sunday. But yeah, either way, to go through some of the other games to talk about here, which performance do you think was more disappointing? Dallas, Arizona, or Green Bay?
Arizona, because Dallas, you knew that they were going to be minus weapons. They just declared Tolbert inactive half an hour before the game, taking away one of their, who you expected to be starting a receiver. And we talked about that on the Bucs pregame show yesterday with Jim. And you looked at it and you're like, who the hell are they going to throw to? CD Lamb had what, 2 catches on 10 targets?
11 targets. But yeah,
11 targets. Now you don't have Prescott for
probably
6
2 months.
weeks. Yep. So you're either down to Cooper Rush, or will they panic and try to pull the trigger and get Jimmy Garoppolo? So, I mean, they're the only team in the NFC East that didn't win yesterday, which is saying something considering how bad we've seen that division be in recent years. But
They're
you look,
the toughest opponent out of any team in that division, but that is true. And I hated the Cowboys roster before Dak even got hurt. So,
but you look at Green Bay, you knew that they were going to have issues. No receivers because Lazard was out. And I think that the tone was set in that game early when Rodgers went deep and Christian Watson watched the ball go through his hands. Would have been a 75-yard touchdown. And he just freaking dropped it. And that set a tone for them. They couldn't come up with anything offensively. They weren't cohesive. But in Arizona, sure, you don't have DeAndre Hopkins, but you still had Kyler Murray. You still had Zach Ertz. Still had A.J. Green. You brought in Hollywood Brown. Connor was there. And you did absolutely nothing in the first half. You watched Murray run around a bunch of times and throw passes seemingly to nothing because all that was there was empty turf, nowhere near the receivers. He held on to the ball too long. They couldn't get a stop on defense, and they just got their asses kicked. And I don't know if the Chiefs were that good or Arizona was that bad because, I mean, they just looked lifeless, and you have to wonder how warm is the seat for Cliff Kingsbury after that dud showing.
I think he's going to get fired by week 8. I think that he's a dead man walking. We mentioned this when we went through the divisions. The Chiefs minus 5.5 was my play today, yesterday for YouTube. So that was never in doubt. Kansas City, I figured would dominate because Andy Reid in week 1 has been incredible, both offensively and just in general. So I thought that the Chiefs would win comfortably. Arizona was also a bit shorthanded, a couple of injuries to the secondary, and it wasn't a very good secondary to begin with. Defensive line's not good either. That defense is awful. And the offense is the main concern because they also had Hollywood Brown who played. They have weapons. I don't know how good the weapons are, but there's some quality players there, and they didn't do anything. They scored in garbage time with I don't remember if they got the 2-point conversion or not, but the point is they had a couple of garbage time drives there. They did nothing for basically the first 3 quarters of the game, and I was happy about it. I had the Chiefs pretty handily, so that was another winner that I had on Sunday. It was really weird because usually my college football Saturdays are really good, and my NFL Sundays are mediocre. It was the opposite this past week. I got killed in college, and I did great in the NFL. But one honorable mention for disappointing showing, which is kind of excused because of the weather, the 49ers. Because I know the weather was awful, and I get the fact that neither quarterback could throw the ball because the weather was so bad. However, I can't look past the fact that this team also was leading by a decent margin at the half. They were up 7-0, which seemed like 7 touchdowns based on the weather, and they were up 10-0. It was 10-0 with more than halfway through the third quarter, and then they got outscored 19-0 to end the game. And Trey Lance, I don't think is any good. I've said it in the past. I don't understand the hype surrounding him at all. I'm not sure how much I can blame him for the bad weather performance because it seemed like you couldn't actually, put your foot in the ground if you're a wide receiver and actually run routes. How much can you read into week 1 with bad weather involving the Niners? Because I still really don't think Trey Lance is good, but I will acknowledge the weather definitely made it basically impossible to look good.
Well, the weather was a factor, but I mean, the fact is both teams had to play in it. And Fields, threw 2 touchdowns and Lance didn't throw any. And that's, something you have to take into consideration. I don't think Lance is that good either. You're looking at a guy who's thrown maybe 400 or 500 passes in competitive play since he graduated high school 5 years ago.
And it looks like it. It's not like his throwing motion is an impressive thing to look at. I mean, it seems like he's got a decent arm in terms of strength. He's got no accuracy at all because his footwork sucks.
Yep, they didn't have Kittle yesterday, so that hurt him. Deebo Samuel had 2 catches on 8 targets.
He had a touchdown in there on the ground, but still
on the ground, yeah. But still, I mean, they lost Elijah Mitchell to an injury. But I mean, I watched Lance and I watched some of his passes, and a bunch of them weren't close.
No, not
I
at all.
mean, he missed Tyler Croft on what should have been a touchdown. And he tries to. I put him in the same category as I put Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. You'll be in the shotgun, they'll drop back. Half the time they don't even look for any
Second
options. They don't even go to a first read. They just take off and run. I mean, you look, he ran the ball 13 times yesterday. Nobody else for San Francisco ran it more than 9.
I'm not going to put Lamar in that same category, but I understand what you're trying to say. He seems like a quarterback who might not even have a read, especially Lance. He has like half a read. He'll look up, and if it's somewhat open, he'll force a throw. If it's not open, he'll run. But I don't think he's any good. I've stated publicly several times. I think Justin Fields is bad too, but at least he made a couple of plays. At least he did something. The throw across the field to Pettis I thought was a nice play in general, but he improvised. You know, he completed 8 passes in bad weather, and you were kind of hoping that's what Lance would do, where worst case scenario, you'd extend some plays and maybe find a break in coverage. And that didn't happen. I see in the comment section, there's also a discussion about, the Jaguars being bad. Yeah, I'm not surprised. They went 0-4 in preseason, and I don't think that this roster is any good. I was impressed by Walker, though. He had a nice interception on that screen pass. But, I mean, ETN I didn't like in college. He looks like a terrible draft pick from Urban Meyer.
My mentality on that is this. Never take a skill player from Clemson and expect him to do anything in the NFL.
Wide receivers have been okay, but still.
Not terribly. I mean, who do they have that's come out that's been good?
DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah,
Sammy Watkins had a run there.
Sammy Watkins had a run like 7 years ago.
Just saying, he had a run. Martavis Bryant was okay before he had the drug issues.
Right, but you look at running back, C.J. Spiller did nothing.
Hunter Renfro's pretty good.
But the grand scheme of things, though, Renfro wasn't a first-round pick. He wasn't picked in the top 5 like
That's
Watkins
fair.
was.
I'm just saying, if we're talking about weapons at Clemson, they've had some receivers. The running backs haven't been good.
But I mean, you can find better players elsewhere that seem to pan out because for some reason, Clemson's players don't tend to transition all that well in the NFL. You look at some of the defensive linemen. You look at Farrell and guys like that. They were drafted a few years ago. Lawrence, and those guys have done nothing. I just, maybe it's the bias of being here and having to listen to how great they are all the time. But you can find quality players elsewhere instead of just buying into the name of Clemson, or as we like to call it here, Clem sucks.
Yeah, but either way, definitely true. The weapons have not been great. But ETN I watched in college. I didn't like him at all. I thought that he seemed to struggle a bit, mostly involving red zone situations, which makes sense because he's a bit undersized. But then use him in pass catching situations, and he doesn't have very good hands either. So I don't really know what he's good at. I think that he's he's fast. Like, I'll give him that, but congrats. I mean, he should have ran track instead if he's not going to be able to catch passes or is not going to be able to find holes in the ground game. I think James Robinson is significantly better than him. So I don't really know why ETN should ever be on the field besides third down stuff. But besides that, yeah.
I don't know why you would put him on for third down stuff because you've got now that Robinson's back, he's a good pass catcher out of the backfield anyway.
Yeah. But either way, Jacksonville I expect to be one of the worst teams in the league again. Some people thought they'd be okay. I still don't think Lawrence is very good either. I think he's better than Fields and company, but I think he's a pretty average at best quarterback, but definitely below average right now. That's how I would break down him. That's how I would summarize his career up to this point. But yeah, there's a lot of NFL teams that people are hoping can climb out of the cellar. You're hoping can suddenly become even watchable at this point. The Commanders are also bad. They're just lucky they play Jacksonville. Houston should have won the game. They choked it against the Colts.
Yep.
But besides that,
of course, Blankenship choked it in overtime, hooking that field goal too.
Yes, he did. But I mean, I'm going through the rest of the schedule. New England's the exact team that I thought they were going to look like in Week 1. That's a bad team.
They are who we thought they were.
And yeah, the Dolphins did not let them off the hook because they scored 7 points.
Crowd on their asses.
I'm just saying, the Patriots are a bad team because they have Matt Patricia calling plays offensively, and their offense wasn't very talented to begin with.
Andrew asked, is that Chiefs running back any good? I'm guessing he's asking about Isaiah Pacheco from Rutgers.
I thought he was talking about Hilaire because he had 2 touchdowns.
Well, I thought everybody knows who Hilaire is, though. He was a
Yeah,
first
but
round pick. Pacheco was drafted in the 38th round?
I think it's a spot where it always helps having Mahomes or having an elite quarterback. We saw Peyton Manning turn Joseph Adai and like no Sean Moreno into solid running backs. Like, what does that mean? It means that the defense are preparing for the pass and you could exploit them. But Hilaire had an underhand touchdown on one of those, like basically a delayed screen, and he also had the handoff and he had a touchdown in there, which was wide open on fourth down. Nobody guarded him. So I think the Chiefs running backs are fine. But it also helps when you have an elite quarterback that's going to take away the entire attention span of the defense.
True, because, if you put Isaiah Pacheco on, for example, Jacksonville.
Or the Bears, throw them anywhere. Like, okay, it'd be maybe a couple of flash plays here and there, but everyone looks better when you get to complement arguably the best quarterback in the league.
Let me ask you, were you surprised about the end result in the Raiders game?
I was surprised by how low scoring the game was, but I'm not surprised that like a Josh McDaniels team found a way to lose a game. I'm not surprised. The Chargers, I thought, were pretty solid. They should have scored more points. The fact that they only scored 24, despite having that good of a performance, statistically speaking, from Herbert, I think is concerning. But am I surprised? No, because I don't think McDaniel's a very good coach. Are you?
No, I mean, I agree. I thought they were going to score more points. I think that people are going to point now and say, well, if the Raiders had played their starters in the preseason, they would have had a little better rhythm because Carr's 3 interceptions were basically timing issues.
Yeah, I don't really buy into that. I just think that Carr was off today. But mostly they had some shots there and they couldn't get the stops when they needed to. And it seemed like they struggled a lot in the red zone early on in the game.
And Matthews said that he was disappointed that his Titans lost, but he's fortunate they're in a bad division. I got bad news for Tennessee fans. It ain't going to get any easier for you.
I don't think they're a very good team either. We talked about them in the division. We picked the Colts by default, but we didn't exactly like the Colts. Tennessee, we had questions about Derrick Henry coming back off a serious injury. He's also usually a slow starter to the season. I didn't think he looked very good in week 1. I know his stats were mediocre. It looks like his explosiveness is like cut in half. Did you notice the same thing?
Yeah, he didn't seem to have them. Then he botched the snap in the Wildcat on 3rd and 1.
It's just about the boost. It just seemed like he didn't have that
extra
jolt that he needed, and I think that's a serious problem. They don't have any weapons, like Robert Woods and Burks. I thought Burks looked pretty good in week 1, but you knew going in Tennessee offensively was going to be a mess, and unless Henry can carry the team, they're going to have problems. And I had questions, and Henry definitely looked a step slow compared to his past couple of years. But I see a question from Kevin asking who the best quarterback is in the NFL. It's either Mahomes or Josh Allen. I'm going with Mahomes. You can argue either way. I'm assuming you would pick Allen, but Mahomes beat him in the playoffs. That's good enough for me. I'll go with Mahomes, but you can argue either way.
Mahomes beat him in the playoffs because of a coin toss, which now will not be an issue going forward.
Well, he also went like 60 yards in 9 seconds. So, some of it was bad defense, I get it. But the point is Mahomes, I know he choked or he was awful in the second half against Cincinnati. He has a ring. He's been incredible. I'll give it to Mahomes, but I will acknowledge Allen is really not that far behind. That's my point.
And I'll go the other way because if it comes down to 3rd and 6 or whatever, and you get flushed out of the pocket, you don't have time to find somebody to run or to throw, and you've got to run to get that first down to keep the drive alive. I'm not trusting Mahomes because he's going to get his brains blown out by some linebacker coming flying across the field. We've watched Josh Allen abuse guys. We saw him abuse Nick Scott the other day on that 3rd and 7 run in the 3rd quarter, where he just shoved him aside like it was beating up a 6-year-old.
I think that Mahomes and Allen are significantly ahead of anybody in 3rd place. But I do think, in my opinion, Mahomes is better by a nose. I think it's close. It really doesn't matter. The point
I'd probably say Herbert probably would be 3rd at this point.
The point is we don't know because Rodgers was awful without Adams, but they have no weapons. Brady, they have no offensive line, so it's really tough to evaluate people. But you're really looking at Mahomes and Allen in any order, and number 3 is not even close. Like, they are miles ahead of anybody else. I think we agree on that. They're easily the top 2 quarterbacks in the league. Can we agree on that?
Tim says Zach Wilson's number 1.
Maybe off the field, but not on the field. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, I don't really have much more to add there.
Zach Wilson doesn't have that dog in him.
I feel like we covered everything there besides the Falcons choking another game away. Congrats. You found another way to blow a game with like a 99% chance to win. Yeah, that's going to do it for the weekend recap there. First of all, do you have any plays on the Broncos game in the parlays or no?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll talk about that during the actual parlays. But before we actually get into your favorite picks, we're going to do what we always do, which is do some housekeeping. And we are brought to you by Caesars. And they have a great deal for first-time users of their app or just their general site. Get up to $1,250 of free bet insurance. So if you end up betting and you lose, you get your money back, which is definitely a fun little promotion they got going. Download the app today. And, of course, check the age limits, bet responsibly, all that fun stuff. And my co-host...
Different states have you taken advantage of that in now?
Yeah, different states have different rules, and you know the drill. So check that out. But my co-host also has his best premium bets every day. Check the link in the show box below. He just said before how we had a couple of parlays over the weekend. You could have made a lot of money betting football following his plays. You have checkout both at Picks and Parlays and the Winners and Winers website and the YouTube channels for free picks. So a lot of picks, a lot of good content that my co-host is producing. Check that out because if you like parlays, you're not going to find much better, parlay options or any parlay bettors that can really compete with them.
You did a good job when I was out last week, and I appreciate you and Jim filling in. Of course, you guys will be back tomorrow because they're actually making me take time off after almost 7 years of doing this, 361 days a year because you get the All-Star break.
I think I worked through the All-Star break, if I'm being honest, but yeah. Give or take. Yeah, but you're going to have a couple days off, so I'll be with Jim, I believe, or maybe I'll just scramble if he's not available. We'll figure something out. But the show will go on, so we got that going for us.
Oh, I'm fine, James. It's just that, after 7 years, they said you have to take a couple days off or we're going to lock you out of the system where you can't do anything. So it just happens to coincide with my anniversary, so.
Yeah, it worked itself out.
It works out, so I'm not going to complain about it. Last week, I was told to take a few days off from doing the show for God knows what reason, because we were short people doing writing.
No, so you took one for the team.
It was entertaining writing 57 games. As for how you can say who's the best quarterback if you're going off stats, Tom Brady. Nobody likes Tom Brady, and nobody's going to say that Brady's in the top quarterback in the league at this point. If you base it on career numbers, perhaps. If you base it off what he's done lately, not so much, just because of the fact that, Tampa Bay, like Scott said, they don't have an offensive line. He looked pedestrian last night, and they were just fortunate that Dallas had no weapons whatsoever.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that Brady all-time is the best quarterback ever. Right now, there's no chance he's better than Mahomes or Allen. Like a 0% chance. Allen and Mahomes are light years ahead of him in terms of talent because they're also mobile. They give you another wrinkle. They also can throw the ball about 30 yards further than Brady. Brady's still good. I'm not saying he's bad, but best quarterback in the league, maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah, I would agree with that. 4 or 5 years ago, sure. Now, not so much.
I personally, if you're asking me which quarterback I think is better between Brady and Rodgers right now, I'm taking Rodgers. It's not a hot take. I'm not picking the 45-year-old guy to be the number one quarterback in the league. I'm not picking that.
Yeah, I mean, he's not. For one thing, he's not mobile. He's basically a stat. He's not going to.
No, he is a statue. I mean, that's what he is.
He's not going to get out of pressure. He was fortunate last night that Dallas couldn't generate a pass rush. But you start facing some of the other teams in the league that can get after a quarterback, and with that offensive line the way it is now, Donovan Smith went down yesterday. They were already minus Jensen. Marpet retired. Kappa went to Cincinnati. Stenny got hurt. I mean, there's not a lot of pieces left on that line that you can rely on. And that's going to make it tough for Brady because if you get a team that can generate a pass rush, whether it's Cam Jordan and company in New Orleans and that's who they'll face this week coming up.
And the Cowboys basically have one guy, and Parsons had 2 sacks.
Yeah. So I mean, that's one of the things you got to look for.
Yeah. But overall, week 1 in the NFL went very well for me. When it came to underdogs, I actually liked the Bears. I liked the Giants. I did well. I liked the Vikings. I had a pretty good overall NFL Sunday. So
Yeah, the Packers were the one that bit me because I got down to when I was doing the 6-teamer for yesterday. I was thinking between the Packers and the Giants, and I was talking to Steen, and then I just typed in the wrong one, and it turned out to be the wrong one because I had the Giants listed on my list, and I just pulled the wrong one and put it in there.
I just like the Vikings because Minnesota was at home. It was the spot that I figured they were undervalued, and they dominated. So
I was a little disappointed that Thielen didn't get more involved, but I guess when you don't cover,
they didn't need to. Jefferson at 180 yards. Like, they
I was saying, when you don't cover Justin Jefferson, they don't have to throw it to Thielen.
Yeah, but either way, it's kind of going to wrap it up for the football recap for the weekend. Now it's time to get into today's action. Chris, I'll let you do your thing. What are the parlays that you like for today?
Yeah, exciting action for sure. Like you said, not a lot of marquee games on the schedule. We'll start with the Braves on the road against the Giants. Scott, do you think Spencer Strider has the Rookie of the Year line locked up? Is Michael Harris going to make a run?
It was over when he struck out 16 guys.
There you go.
He set the franchise record for strikeouts in a game. Like, it's over. Like, he won the award.
And he's going against Alex Cobb. Don't have a ton of faith in the Giants. They struggled to score runs against the Cubs over the weekend. I think they had a total of 11 runs. Of course, the game they lost was the game that Rodon started on Friday, where I thought that they would win that one. And they scored 2.
Yeah.
But now they got to fly back after Sunday Night Baseball. You know, Atlanta just had to fly down from Seattle after yesterday's game. And I like Strider a lot more than I like Cobb.
Yeah, I agree.
This other one was a little bit of weird because the Blue Jays are throwing Berrios. The Rays are throwing Cooper Criswell, who hasn't pitched in the majors this season. I don't think he's pitched in the majors at all. Just going to check here real quick. 26-year-old kid. Oh, he has pitched in the majors apparently once. When? Oh, he pitched for the Angels last year. Gave him 3 runs in an inning and a third. Don't like it. Don't like those numbers too much. He hasn't pitched much in the minors this year. He's only made 14 appearances, 9 starts, covering 45 and a third. Tampa Bay won't have Brooks Raley. He's, was unable to cross the border. Tampa Bay's bullpen kind of got battered around over the weekend. They had to throw a lot of innings because Kluber got lit up Saturday. What was it, Patino that got lit up yesterday?
Yeah, Patino got killed. Oh, they both got killed.
So that put a lot of stress on Tampa Bay's bullpen. And Toronto, they were playing pretty well. They got stopped yesterday by Martin Perez, but Perez has pitched pretty well for a guy that, couldn't throw strikes a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But in this one, I don't think Tampa Bay has enough power to make Berrios pay for it. So I'll take the Blue Jays in that one.
Yeah.
The other one's correlated, Scott. The Astros over the Tigers. Framber Valdez took the loss in his last start, gave up the winning run, I think, on a wild pitch or something against the Rangers. Still threw a quality start. Still went 6 2/3. I think he'll shut down the Tigers and Eduardo Rodriguez, and I think he'll go over 6.5 strikeouts. I think pretty much anybody can go over 6.5 strikeouts against the Tigers because they'll swing at anything. You've got Javier Baez, who, if you see a kid bouncing a rubber ball down the street, Baez will watch it bounce 3 times and still swing at it anyway. There's no reason to think Valdez can't get to 8 or 9 strikeouts in this one.
Yeah, I think Valdez is going to pitch well. Houston, we know, is competing or the favorites right now to have the best record in the American League. So, yeah, I think they'll dominate tonight and probably win, I don't even know, like 5-1, something like that.
Yeah, I can see it staying under the total. Totals at 7, and a lot of books now open at 7.5.
I'm leaning under anyway because Eduardo's actually been okay for Detroit recently.
Yeah, which is strange because you think about how he had been gone for, 3 months or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're talking about a Tigers team that doesn't have Cabrera. Austin Meadows, of course, won't be back this year. So, you're taking a couple of valuable bats out of the lineup. And I just think that Detroit will probably have a party if they score 2.
Yeah.
So we can move on to the fourth for the show here. This one was tough. The Guardians over the Angels, it's Connor Pilkington and Reed Detmers. And Detmers hasn't pitched in about a week and a half. Pilkington's been in the made one appearance in the majors in the last 6 weeks. But let's face it, the Guardians have something to play for. The Angels don't. I know that Trout's been on a roll for the Angels. I also know that the Angels have a bunch of guys that can't hit.
That's one way to put it.
I was trying to be generous.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, that's one way to put it.
Do you have any thoughts on that game in particular?
I was leaning to the Guardians anyway, just because the Angels can get all the production they want from Ohtani and Trout, and they still find ways to lose games. We've seen it countless times this year. I don't think they're a well-managed team. They're not a deep team at all. The Guardians, I actually like because they're the opposite of the Angels. You look at the talent on paper, you think it's pretty mediocre, but their bullpen's really good. So if they're winning late in games, they tend to hold on, and they find ways to win games that they probably don't deserve to win. So I actually like the Guardians in general in this spot. I think it's a pretty good price.
Yeah, I was worried the other day when they were up, 7-0 on Minnesota, and then had to hang on to win 7-6.
Yeah, still got there.
Yeah. Andrew saying that when's the last time Wilson threw for 250? Well, he threw for 254 in the opener last year against the Colts, 343 against the Titans in week 2, 298 against Minnesota in week 3. He had 260 against Houston. He had just under 250 on multiple occasions as well. And that was playing in an offense in Seattle that was more focused on running the ball.
He also played with a broken finger for about, I don't know, a month and a half.
There's that too. Now you're looking at a Denver team that actually has some weapons. You've got Sutton and you've got Jerry Jeudy. I know they'll miss Tim Patrick, but somebody else will step up. Plus, they've got Albert O. I'm not going to try and pronounce his name. Can you pronounce his name, Scott?
I call him Albert O as well.
Okay. So we're just going to call him Albert O because it's just easier. I just think that, Seattle's defense is so bad that
I think Denver's got a good overall team.
Yeah. Yeah, late in the year, he couldn't break 200 last year because of the fact that, like Scott said, he was dealing with that broken finger that he missed, weeks 6, 7, and 8 last year. And then when he came back, his high number was 260 against Houston in week 13.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm tossing all the second half stats in the garbage for Wilson because he was playing on a compromised finger. He shouldn't have been playing, but Seattle was still hypothetically competing for a playoff spot they had a 0% chance of getting. I don't know why Wilson was playing, but it's tough to fully evaluate stats when there's variables like injuries that you kind of have to account for. I think Wilson's going to perform well tonight. It might still be too many yards because Denver might just crush this team and run the ball down the stretch. But I do personally think that Denver should win comfortably tonight.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that they can hit Seattle early for a few big pass plays, and that'll help them along the way. James still ranting about how Brady's the best quarterback in the NFL today.
I'm not saying he's bad. Like, I get it. He's the best quarterback of all time. You could argue, I don't think it's an argument, he's the best pre-snap quarterback in the league right now. He's probably the best pre-snap quarterback of all time. But right now, if you throw him on a bad team, like a really bad team, he would probably lose more games than Allen and Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, if Tom Brady spent his entire career playing for the New York Jets,
forget about the career. Let's just go right now. If you would throw Tom Brady on the Jets or on the Jaguars, and you would throw Mahomes or Josh Allen on the same team, who would win more games? Probably Mahomes and Josh Allen. There's nothing against Brady. He's an all-time great quarterback. But I'm acknowledging that because of the lack of mobility and the lack of arm strength right now at 45, I can't say he's the best quarterback in the league right now. I don't think it's close. I think he's probably still top 5, but top 2? No, he's not top 2.
And like you said, he doesn't have the mobility to navigate out of pressure. He can't beat you with his legs. He can't make the deep throws or the throws on the run like the one that Allen snapped off to Diggs on that last touchdown against the Rams, where he threw it 50-some yards while he was in the air with no feet on the ground. Brady's not going to do that. Brady, if you compare arms, Brady's comparing him to Josh Allen now. Brady would look like Steve Grogan, who, I don't know, how familiar are you with Steve Grogan, Scott?
I know he had a noodle arm.
If you ever played Tecmo Super Bowl for the Nintendo, when they showed passing speed and stuff like that, on a scale of 100, Grogan's was 13.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But Matthew's mentioning a good point, kind of pushing back. Do I think Brady's a better pre-snap quarterback than Peyton? I think it's very, very close. I think Brady's incredible with anticipation and with really just reading defensive coverages at the line of scrimmage. I think you can argue it's 1A, 1B, but I do think that Brady pre-snap, he has an argument with Peyton to be number one all time, in my opinion. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's where I stand.
And pre-snap, sure.
Yeah. So that's why he's so successful. That's why Brady's an all-time great. And why he's probably the best of all time. It's because he was never a physically imposing elite quarterback. He was just smarter than everybody else on the field. And he's still smarter than everyone else in the field. I just think eventually his physical limitations are more noticeable because he's 45 years old. That's my point.
Right. James saying IQ and knowledge of the game. Sure, I'm not going to take that away from him. Like you said, he's got a high football IQ. He's got knowledge. But you have to have the physical capabilities to play at that level to be number one right now. And at this point, at 45 years old, he doesn't. Like Scott said, 5-6 years ago, sure, he might have had a chance. But the game has evolved so much now where you've got these quarterbacks that have the size, they have the mobility, and they have the football IQ to make plays that Brady doesn't have. Sure, he threw for over 5,000 yards last year. Do you know why? Because Tampa Bay was 26th in the league running the ball. I mean, look at their running stats. They were horrible.
Again, we're not saying that Brady's bad. Like, that's not the point of the discussion. The point is, if you're asking right now who's the best quarterback in the league, I'm picking Mahomes and I'm picking Allen before I'm picking Brady. I'm probably picking Rodgers before Brady as well. But still, that's kind of where I stand in it. But anyway, you want to move on to the large shot in the dark, because Wilson might have a revenge angle there where they're going to try to force feed him some passes to run up the score on his former team. And Strider, we expect to strike out a bunch of guys because he's Strider. That's kind of the takeaway, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I can see Russell Wilson being like Rick Vaughn, where he's like, you may think I'm shit now, but I'm going to catch on somewhere else.
Yeah.
And every time that I pitch against you, I'm going to stick it up your fucking ass. And that's basically what Denver's going to do to Seattle tonight. Nathan, I do like the Dodgers. I just didn't put them up here. I saw it was supposed to be Merrill Kelly, then they flipped to Ryan Nelson. Nelson was good in his first start through 7 shutout innings.
It's a bit of a downgrade, though, to go from Kelly to Nelson. That's a bit of a downgrade.
Yeah, so I would back the Dodgers. I mean, they found out that they thought they were in the playoffs yesterday, and then found out today they weren't in the playoffs.
They'll be in tomorrow. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, because, if some fluke where, they lose 23 in a row and Milwaukee wins their last 21, then they could end up in a 3-way tie or some crap. But, yeah, Anderson will just put it to bed, and then we won't have to talk about that again.
Yep.
I'm going to go with Austin Riley over 1.5 total bases, plus 115. Weather not going to be favorable necessarily out in Oracle Park. I think they're saying it's supposed to be about, 59 degrees, something like that.
Yeah, but he's facing off against wood, so he's going to kill lefties. He kills lefties every time he faces lefties.
It's not wood, it's Cobb.
Oh, sorry, it's Cobb. My bad. Whoops. I'm merging bad, mediocre journeyman pitchers. Sorry about that.
Dave Alex. But yeah, I think that Riley should be able to take advantage of that. Of course, you got to put Trout on there. Any guy that homers 6 games in a row and has been on a tear like Trout, is the fact that you can still get him at plus money is hilarious. James, you can keep ranting about Brady. I've got news for you. It's not going to change my mind. It's not going to change Scott's mind. You can talk about how he won 37 titles. You can talk about how he threw for 5,000 yards last year. I'll point out that Marino did it in 16 games in an era when most teams ran the ball more than half the time, as opposed to Brady throwing 675 or whatever it was passes last season. In an era when, and I don't even like Dan Marino, but Brady threw the ball 719 times last year and led the league. Reichel can throw the ball 719 times in today's NFL and throw for 5,000 yards.
I'm not gonna go back to the Brady point, but it's mostly just I feel like yesterday's game kind of was a perfect example of why I think Mahomes and Allen are better right now. It's because if you have no offensive line, I think Allen and Mahomes can do a lot more with less protection than Brady can, and I think that's really not debatable at this point.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the main way I look at it. I think Brady needs a good offensive line in order to put up massive numbers, and last year he had that. This year he doesn't. So I don't think Brady's going to look very good this year, in my opinion. It's not his fault, but it is what it is.
Yeah, now Godwin, hurting his hamstring. I haven't heard anything further on that situation yet.
Yeah, the weapons are fine, though. Like, they have good weapons. Brady will still throw touchdown passes, but I'm going to throw it out there. If he doesn't have a lot of time to throw, he can't extend plays. That's kind of my point. That's why I'll take Mahomes and Allen over. But I see a question from James if I'm going to be watching the Triple G Canelo fight. Probably. I'm rooting for Triple G. He's one of my favorite fighters. He won the first one. He got hosed. I think Canelo's going to win. I mean, Triple G's basically 40 at this point.
He hasn't fought in a while, has he?
I was going to say, Canelo ended up losing when he moved up in weight and he got manhandled because he went to a weight class he probably shouldn't have been fighting at. Now he's going back down. I think Canelo wins comfortably. I'm rooting for Triple G, but he's 40. I think Canelo wins probably by decision. If I had to guess, I'm going to go Canelo by decision.
Has Triple G fought much in the last couple of years?
He ended up winning his last fight. I forgot who he fought against. Let me see who he fought against.
Hold on, I got box right. He beat Saul Alvarez. No, wait, that's Canelo.
That's
Canelo.
Technically he beat Canelo, but the judges gave him a loss both times. The second one he might have. So he fought in 2022 in April. He beat Murata in Japan by knockout. So I know he fought somewhat recently. Murata's, not a well-known guy. He's fine, but the point is, yeah, you get the idea. Canelo's still an elite fighter. I'm not going to overreact him moving up in weight and getting embarrassed because he gave up a bunch of size. It happens. Canelo experimented, tried to win another belt. He lost. Now he's going back down where he's comfortable. Canelo probably in decision. You?
Probably just because of the fact I didn't realize that Canelo's now going as Saul Alvarez. It threw me off.
I hope that I'm wrong. I'm rooting for Triple G, but he's at 40. Like Canelo's younger. I just think he's going to win.
Yeah. Plus, he's had a lot more fights lately because before that fight against Murata, he hadn't fought since Triple G hadn't fought since December of 2020, and before that it was 14 months before that when he had fought previously.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have to wonder how much he's got in the tank at this point because he hasn't fought all that much.
Yeah, true.
Which game's the trap game? The Mets, the Dodgers, or the Braves? I don't think the Braves are the trap game.
I don't think it's the Braves either. Let me see.
I don't know if
you have any thoughts initially?
I think if I had to pick one, I'd say the Mets were the trap just because they've been floundering so much lately.
And floundering means that they've been okay. It's just the fact that the Braves have been going nuclear.
Well, but I mean, they fell out of first place. I don't know. And they've had a lot of issues with injuries and putting runs on the board. I think they'd probably be the bigger trap than the Dodgers and the Braves if I had to pick out of the three.
You know what? If I'm going to pick out of the three, give me the Diamondbacks. Screw it. Nelson's been good in basically one outing. Diamondbacks are above 500 at home. I don't think either of them are going to win, or any of these teams are going to win. But, Arizona's been good at home. If I had to pick one, I'll take the home dog.
Yeah, I could see that.
Once again, Dodgers are probably going to win, but I'm just picking one.
Right. It's going to be interesting to say the least.
Yep.
Bo Bichette, Scott, explain to me why he's plus money.
I don't know. They're in a dome. Rays are going to have to throw out a bunch of pretty underwhelming options at pitcher. I think Bichette's probably going to get maybe a double, maybe a home run.
In his last 10 games, he has 22 hits.
Yeah. He's been cooking.
So, I mean, if you want to take the over 1.5 hits prop, that's at plus 190. I don't understand that because if you get the at least 2 hits, that's at 145 on FanDuel.
Yeah.
But you can get over 1.5 at plus 190.
Mm-hmm.
Explain that to me.
No, it's bad math.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something because
No, it's bad
you
math.
do a lot more with the hit props than I do sometimes.
Yeah.
Trey Mancini, big number there, but if you look in his career, he's 12 for 41 against Rodriguez in his career. He's got a couple of homers against him, a few doubles. And he's a guy that Houston went out and picked up. They should put him to work down the stretch here. I think that he should do all right in this one. Jake Fraley, he's facing the Pirates. As you can see in the line below, it's Bryce Wilson.
Well, you know that I've been pushing Fraley for like a month already. I mentioned him did a home run about a couple weeks ago.
That was the day where you had to hit a home run, and I had Bubba Thompson to steal.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like I think Fraley's not bad, or at least for the Reds, he's not bad. Might be comparative because everyone else on the team's terrible, but no, Fraley's been good with that team.
Yeah, and I actually like the Reds over the Pirates. Don't like Bryce Wilson.
Minor's anybody likes Bryce Wilson.
I don't think Bryce Wilson's mom likes him.
That might be a little bit too far, but I don't know.
Well, that's just according to speculation around PNC Park. We'd have to ask Marlowe, but I don't see
according to your anonymous sources.
Yeah, I'm a broadcast journalist.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Barrios over 4.5 strikeouts. We know Tampa Bay has had their problems at putting runs on the board, especially on the road. JoJo said the Rangers just tied the game with the Marlins.
Yeah, I'm actually watching it. He cranked one that could have been potentially a go-ahead run, but he hit it right at the guy.
Of course.
2-2.
Tommy Nance, another I think he was in the Cubs system for a bit.
He faced two guys. They got both out. It was just they left Rogers in for too long, and he just let a bunch of guys get on base.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Yeah.
Mike Minor over 5.5 strikeouts. Scott, do you have any faith in the Pirates lineup?
I think the only concern is Minor's so bad he can struggle against anybody, but that does seem a little bit low, especially at plus 128. And Minor's always been a strikeout guy.
True. And I think he had I know he didn't strike many guys out in his last start, but he had a start a couple starts ago. He struck out 7 against the Nationals. He's got a couple sixes in there. He only struck out 1 against Pittsburgh in his last start against them, which is weird because he went 5 2/3 innings.
Yeah.
I think he'll do better than that this time around. Javier Assad over 3.5 strikeouts. I know it's a weird one, but let's face it, it's a weird card. And finally, Connor Pilkington over 4.5 strikeouts because, like we said, the Angels can't hit outside of Trout, Ohtani, and once in a while Taylor Ward, and sometimes Rengifo, but got a lot of holes in the rest of that lineup. Scott, what do you make of the second game of that doubleheader with Gray facing Braxton Garrett as Gray comes off the IL to make his first start since I don't even know when? August 1st.
Yeah, I always try to fade pitchers off the IL, especially if they're favored. But, I mean, if the Marlins, well, honestly, even if they win the game today, they've lost 11 of their last 13. So that's why I took Texas plus money in the game 1. I probably lean to the Marlins in game 2 just because I tend to fade pitchers off the IL, but I don't really feel great about either side in that game.
Yeah, that line
on blind principle.
I was going to say that line shifted quite a bit because I'm pretty sure Miami was favored when the lines came out. Now they're an underdog in that one against Gray. But Braxton Garrett, he hasn't been bad. Took a no decision in his last start through 6 scoreless against Atlanta in a game they lost 3-1. His problem is they haven't scored any runs for him. His last 4 starts, they've scored a total of 6 runs, including 1 run in each of their last 3.
Yeah, I'm still going to lean to the under because I know Miami can't hit. But either way, you have anything else you want to add, or should we wrap it up?
No, I think we can wrap it up. I think we got everything covered.
Cool. So you can find us back, or you can find me back here again tomorrow. Chris is on forced vacation on a forced anniversary special. So we'll see him back sometime next week. You're not going to be back this week, right?
I'll be back Monday.
Okay, so I'll see you back on Monday. I'll be back with either Jim or somebody. I'll be here at some capacity. But until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.